I used to work for a boss who we nicknamed the Dementor because his ego just sucked all of the air and the joy out of any room he walked into. So in this video, I'm going to explore some of the things you can do if this happens to you, and ultimately how you can make things better for the whole team. When a boss puts their own ego in front of the team, it can cause all sorts of trouble. And actually over the last year and a half, if you've been working remotely, then you've probably not had to deal with like this element of office politics, or it's been easier to kind of ignore. But as many of us now thinking about transitioning back to the world of work and in office meetings, being able to understand how to deal with someone who's got a big ego and neutralise it when you can is really important. Now, let's be honest, everyone has an ego and everyone to a certain extent responds to flattery. And having an ego in itself is not a bad thing. It's just if it gets in the way of things or goes too far and ultimately becomes an unhealthy dynamic within the team, that it causes a problem. It can be painful at best and maybe a source of humour for some of you, but can also create stress and tension as you work around your boss's ego rather focusing on the core tasks at hand. So the first thing to do is assess the situation, and that's over a period of weeks or months, not just a one-off reaction to a meeting or a particular situation that's happened, and understand how serious it actually is. If it's not that serious, then you can have some fun behind the scenes and perhaps lighten the mood within the team. One of the tips may be to play like phrase bingo, or when they refer to themselves or their achievements, that between you and the team, you can treat it as like a comical thing and perhaps keep like a little tally going, just so that it lightens the mood and kind of takes the sting out of it. However, if you think it may be serious, it's worth watching over a period of time to see if there are patterns and trends. If it happens all of the time, they're probably like a full-blown narcissist, and that's like a separate issue that needs to be dealt with. However, if it just comes and goes or is only in certain situations, it may be that you can set out a pattern for that and understand what the triggers are. Then once you understand what the triggers are and perhaps when they might be heightened, you as a team can try to avoid those situations occurring or have a strategy in place to deal with it when it does. Ego is often linked to people's own insecurities or imposter syndrome, and I've got a separate video on imposter syndrome which I'll link below. So that's why it's important to understand the causes of it, so that you can perhaps deal with it more appropriately. Secondly, absolutely do not call it out in public. That's probably the worst thing you can do to someone who has an ego, who won't want to be embarrassed or slighted in a public forum. So if it is something you feel like you want to talk to them about, make sure you do it in a private setting, and also not straight after an incident, a bit like relationship theory. Make sure that you do it kind of a couple of weeks after an event, or not too like close to the actual time so they don't feel too emotionally charged about it. In that conversation, don't just put your case across, but also seek to understand what perhaps their viewpoint is, and ultimately try and help you to understand what they need to help manage that behaviour. Interestingly, often people who have large egos respect confidence in others. So maintaining your own interactions with them in a confident way, or maintaining a confident stance with them, will actually help you in the long run. Obviously, if their behaviour is tipping over into bullying, that's something completely different and needs to be dealt with differently. But if you can maintain your confidence and approach things in a confident manner with those people, then that's going to help you build a relationship with them on an ongoing basis. Another tip to do is not to call out their ego or tackle them on a subject where either you are the expert and they might feel like they're being embarrassed, or where they absolutely feel like they are the expert because they will feel like their authority is being challenged. Instead, do it on a more neutral topic where perhaps both of you know about as much as each other, or something where they perhaps know slightly less about. Then that will just help you to manage the ego and make sure that you don't inflame the situation. If you do want to speak to them about it, couch it in concern and about how it might be reflecting upon them. Most people who suffer from a large ego don't want to be disliked or would hate to think that everyone doesn't think they're great. So if you can couch your concerns by saying, oh, I noticed that Susan on the team's really intimidated when you talk to her, it might help them to understand the impact that it's having on others, but equally appeal to their flattery and their ego in terms of making sure that everyone perceives them in a really good light. Another thing you can do is appeal to their ego and get them involved in certain projects or events where they can take the spotlight. This might feed their ego to a certain extent, but help manage it from when it's less helpful for you as a team. So if you've got an upcoming event or project that you know that perhaps their skill set's going to be well suited to, or would give them a forum to show off, then perhaps ask them to do that, and that might allow you and the rest of the team to get on with other projects and events which aren't going to be impacted by their ego. Or if there's not a specific project or event, perhaps asking them to speak at a team meeting or on a briefing session. You can say something like, you're so good at business development, would you mind coming to talk to the team or doing a training session on it? They'll very likely not say no, and also what it helps you to do is feed that ego subtly, but allow you to get on with other projects where perhaps their behaviour is unhelpful and it's spilling over. Now, perhaps you're watching this and worried that actually you might have a slightly too large ego and you want to know what to do about it. The first thing I'd say is to look at the language that you use with your team and in a work situation. If you're using I much more than we, that might imply that perhaps your ego is getting in the way and you want to take credit for the things that are good. There's nothing wrong with saying I when you're taking accountability or responsibility for things, but if you're constantly taking the glories of your team or the accolades, then perhaps you want to think about refocusing that. The second thing, which is actually more difficult to do, is perhaps becoming uncomfortable with sharing your failures or weaknesses in a more public forum. If you're constantly saying how good you are or how well you've done, but you're not sharing the other side of the coin, it impacts your effectiveness as a leader and makes you come across like you have a slightly large ego. By being more comfortable about sharing the areas where perhaps you haven't done as well as you could, or lessons you've learned in the past where you failed, that will make you much more relatable to your team and also help you build more effective relationships. And finally, if someone in your team has been watching this video and now comes to talk to you about it, try to depersonalise the situation. Most people will not be trying to challenge your authority or try and get one over on you. They're genuinely either feeling this is impacting on them or the team and they want to correct the situation. So if someone has the confidence to come and talk to you about this, listen to what they are saying, but also try and depersonalise it from yourself. Try to take your own feelings and ego out of it and work with them to develop better ways of working for the future. Egos are used by all of us as a protection mechanism and to help us feel more comfortable and safe where we are. If your boss is exhibiting lots of ego issues, then there may well be performance or pressures that you're not aware of. So as with anything, approach it with empathy and see if you can work your way through it. I'd love to hear if you've experienced a boss who has a big ego and the stories that perhaps has created. I'm Liz, and here on my channel we talk about management and leadership issues and give you the tips, tricks and hacks to help you navigate the challenges of your career.